I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. My friends, I am here with a longtime friend, Becca, who I haven't seen in a long time.
A long time.
It's been a long time. Becca and I used to work together at a school here in Orlando, which you've heard me say on a couple of other episodes. But I will say, honestly, friend, you are the reason that I was able to have success in that school. Because I came in as like a 28-year-old, never taught, didn't really understand what was really going on. And you were there as the like cheerleader, but also here's how you do it. And I'm going to help you through it. It wasn't a competition. It wasn't anything like that. So I thank you for that.
Well, we were both babies, I feel like. So it's, I think just remembering back to those days, I think we were both figuring it out together. And back at you, you were teaching me anything and everything I could know about business, which I didn't really know much about when I was teaching. So
we had a good time when you were there, and then you left us for bigger and better things. And I am in awe of the journey that you've taken since we parted ways. And I'm excited that you are willing to share your story, because I know there's a lot in your story. And on this podcast, I've had the opportunity to talk to people about these intense, pivotal moments that have really kind of shifted the entire existence, like their whole life kind of shattered. And they were like, how do I put this back together? What do I do? Mm-hmm. And I feel like you had a convergence of many things throughout your life, actually, but like in different moments of time. So maybe you can just set the stage of kind of just who you are, what's going on, what your life has been like up until maybe one of those major points.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that. I think, it's so interesting because I feel like rather than just like the one thing, I imagine like a vase with like many different cracks in it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that I've always had this orientation toward like seeing where those are at and trying to kind of fix them, despite maybe not necessarily knowing why or how those things are happening. And so, the quick version of the story is, I grew up in Indiana, so Midwest, and I grew up in probably like a I don't think I was super aware of social class, but probably like a lower middle class family, or maybe an upper like lower class family. I don't know if that's an actual distinction, but we were not poverty poor. Like, right. We had a house, not a nice house, but a house. We had a roof over our heads. Most of the time we had food, but my parents worked. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a social worker, and they worked opposite shifts. And like, it's one of those things where you're not making meaning of it, like, right, when you're a kid growing up in it, but like looking back at it as an adult, I'm like, no wonder it probably wasn't the most like functional household. Yeah. Like, they never saw each other, even when they were married. They were taking care of us, trying to figure out, dealing with their own things that people deal with as an adult. So anyway, I grew up in a sometimes stable home, I would say. It wasn't completely unstable. It was not completely stable. It was a sometimes stable home.
Do you feel that you were aware of that at the time?
I don't think when I was really little, but definitely as I got a little bit older. I think like once you get to that place where you're like having sleepovers at like your friends' houses and stuff, and you're like, oh, like this is not what my experience is like at all. It's like, until you have like, I guess, a context or a point of comparison, you don't really know. It's just like your life. So, and I think about that with my own kiddo now, because I'm like, this is just what you think life is. Like, that is wild to me. So I don't think I was super aware of it, but I did I mean, the early years are hard to remember, I think, for all of us. But, I mean, I definitely have, I think I spent most of my like childhood and my growing up as I became more aware of the, like my home life conditions and the sort of kind of like dysfunction that was happening there. I think I spent a lot of time, and this is something that sticks with me to this day, like really trying to like pass in some ways as like coming from something that looked very different than what I came from.
Right.
So like, I got a job when I like when I was 14 or 15 because I wanted to be able to like buy clothes that like my mom and my dad like wouldn't buy for me. Like I wanted to be able to like, I just like didn't want to stick out. I just like, yeah, I just like wanted to, I just wanted to belong, right? I mean, I think everyone wants
Yeah.
that to, to a certain extent. And I have this memory, and I've like actually written about it before. And this is maybe like the first time, and maybe it, I don't know, fed into that, but I must have been like first or second grade, and I was in line. I had these cool, I don't know, do you remember Alf?
Yeah, of course.
Like that show, Alf?
Yeah.
So I had these like high top sneakers that had Alf on them. They were cool. And I remember I was standing in line like you do in elementary school, to go to the bathroom or something. I don't know. They put you in lines for everything. So where were we going? I have no idea. But I remember I think somebody said something, or my teacher said something like, those are really cool shoes, like Alf, like I love that show. And I said, oh, like, yeah, I really like them. I just got them at Goodwill. And like, I didn't, like, to me, Goodwill was just a store. Yeah. So like I just said it. And my teacher pulled me aside at some point shortly thereafter and was like, you probably shouldn't tell people that you shop at Goodwill. And, it's not like you're just like in first or second grade. So I'm like, okay, I did something wrong. Like my teacher just told me I did something wrong. I'm like, I truly did not know it was wrong. Right. And so I think that I can think about experiences like that where, it was just like, oh, okay, like this is happening, but I don't want to, present in that way or whatever. Yeah.
I hope that teacher regretted saying that, because it's like introducing shame to a kid.
Yeah. But it's like, did she like probably think she was doing something nice though, right? Like, I don't think it was like ill intended. I think it was like,
Yeah.
I think I'm protecting her by telling her like you probably shouldn't let people know that, right? Like one of those sorts of things. And I'm like, wow, how many times in our lives do we say things that are probably just like a small little thing you never think about again? And like, here I am at 40 years old. Like I have this distinct memory of being like, oh, I guess you don't tell people everything, and you have to curate in some ways like a version of yourself, whether or not it's true, to present. And so I feel like much of my like childhood and adolescence was that. I mean, I think I did well at things because I got really good at being the person that didn't need to feel like ashamed of things. Like I was like, I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to.
Did you feel the need to like prove something, or was it more to pretend or to feel like you fit in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it was about proving something, or if it was just to myself. I don't think it was like, but I think it really was like and looking back, it's so interesting because I'm like, I feel like it probably kept me from, it's like I always describe myself as like, I was like pretty good at everything. I wasn't really good at anything, but I wasn't bad at anything either, right? Like everything was this kind of like, I want to be in like the top 10, but I don't want to be number one.
Right.
Because like that's too much attention, and then people might start looking behind the curtain sort of thing, right? Like I want to be really good, but not like the best.
Right.
And so, I found that to be kind of my place. And I think, it's like, what if I, I don't know, what if I would have open myself up more to like failing, or open myself up to, more to like being in that authentic space. But also I wouldn't like change anything because all of those experiences have made me who I am. But, I got really involved in like music. I played in the band when I was in junior high. And then once I got to high school, I was like marching band, doing like theater, doing all of the like the music stuff. Like those were my people. And, just like lived a pretty happy existence where I was like hiding a lot of things from a lot of people. Like there were very few people with whom I think I actually had, like looking back, that I had really authentic relationships with. And I think it's just because I didn't have an authentic relationship with myself, if that
Right.
makes any sense. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not their fault that I wasn't, but I did have a boyfriend in high school. We were together for a few years. And like, I think he saw behind the curtains enough to like really show me that like the real me was
Yeah.
deserving of love.
Yeah.
And then I have a really good friend from, we didn't meet till middle school, but we're like still in touch and close to this day, you know, in our separate adult lives. But, you know, who I think like we never really talked about it maybe the same way as I did with my boyfriend, but like I understand now that we're adults, like she saw a lot of things
Yeah.
and she was like, I love you anyway.
Yeah.
You know, like this is like, that is not about you, you know? And so, you know, I feel like, and my parents got divorced while I was in high school, you know, so that was messy, but they weren't happy for a long time. That was like a really dramatic thing. I also saw how my dad treated my mom, and my mom had like chronic mental health issues. And so I think again, it was just like I felt like I was holding everything together either for myself or for, you know, everybody else.
Yeah.
So when I got to go to college, I was like, goodbye. Like I am going, I am gonna like, you know, go to college, do that. And so I did that. And but again, looking back, I don't think I was unhappy per se, but I definitely spent college being the person I thought I should be, and not necessarily, I think, like really, I don't know, leaning into things that feel authentically me. But I was also trying out a lot of things. Like most people do that in college, right? It's like maybe I'm the this person. Maybe I'm the this person. I don't know.
But also, I think in our generation, we were conditioned to graduate high school, and then we were supposed to go to college, and then we were supposed to graduate and do well and then get a good job. You know, like it was just very expected of us. So I think probably a lot of people that are in their 40s right now can relate to kind of going to college and just doing what you're supposed to do, right? Not finding your joy. Whereas I'm jealous of people going to college now that like are authentically going for something that they're like think they're passionate about and can explore and can figure that out.
Oh my gosh, the stuff they know. I mean, I work with college students every day. The stuff they walk in knowing and having language for.
Right.
I'm like I am a scholar of environmental justice now. I didn't even know that phrase until I was probably 25. Like, and they come in and they just like, they know those sorts of things, right? It is a really different world for sure.
Yeah. But they're a product of,
not to age us too much, but
they're a product of the internet as well. So they grew up always having the internet, whereas you and I had to go to like an actual library and use the Dewey Decimal System and those things. So, you know.
Yeah, I've been called, because since I work in a lot of academic spaces, I've had people, I don't know if you've had this happen before, where people will be like, well, you're a digital native. And I'm like, I'm actually, I would say my like betweener sort of generation that we're more like digital adapters.
Yep.
Like we had to learn to adapt very quickly to technology because it was changing during times in our life where we needed to rely on it to be successful, like in college. Like I always tell the story. I'm like, when I started at college, like we had, I'm pretty sure, like dial-up internet in my dorm. And then by the time I was, and we had like the old email that was like MS-DOS, like the black screen with like the typeface that kind of comes across it. But by the time I graduated 4 years later, like the campus was being outfitted with like Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And there was like a central portal with like Blackboard and our email and our, you know, it's like, things changed that quickly. And so I'm like, I don't think I'd call myself a digital native, but I am very comfortable in the digital world. I've had to adapt to it very quickly. So
we had to spend our free time outside until the lights went, you know, until the sun went down. We didn't have the internet and games and TV and all that stuff.
Yeah, I had books. I didn't spend probably too much time outside as a kid, but I did read a lot. And so, it still wasn't computers and things like that. It was like, oh my gosh, series and series and series of books. And my mom would ground me and I would like mouth off to her. I never did anything like really bad, but I would like talk back or something. And she would be like, you're grounded from reading and you have to go outside. That was like,
That was your
that was
punishment.
not good. Yeah, which is hilarious if you know me now, because it's like not how I live my life. But yeah, so like went to college. I went and did my master's program after that, and that was a pretty transformative experience. That was like another crack in that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I think there were some things that were exposed to me that were really pivotal to me
Yeah.
during that time. I think partially because, or maybe mostly because all of what we were like learning in that program, we were being asked to situate in our own experience. So I had never like gone through therapy before. I had never done any of those things before. And so we were being given these prompts, which were probably at their face, like fairly innocuous. Like, when was the first time you were aware of like your race or something
Right.
like that, but they like those sorts of things, while they were meant to kind of like teach us about how other people experience the world in different ways and, move through the world in different ways, it was like bringing up for me all of these things that I had like suppressed, I think, in this journey to become like this, I don't know, veneered, cultivated, like version of myself. And like truly a lot of things that I like had never really thought about since they happened. Like they'd been like tucked to, I always think of like the movie Inside Out, how they have like the marbles and like they get rid of the marbles sometimes, but then they come back out. And, I feel like that movie is so smart because it just feels very like, oh yeah. So a lot of my marbles were coming back out, I guess I should say, like during my master's program.
So when you say the cracks, you're saying like the cracks in kind of that mask you were wearing.
Yeah, yeah. I think like going back to like was there one pivotal life shift? No, but there were like all of these mini, like mini fissures, I guess, in like a vase or something, I guess is what I'm thinking of. And that was definitely one of those. And it was a bigger one of them.
Yeah. Because it forced you to almost do therapy on your own through your assignments,
Yeah.
which I can relate
Yeah.
to. I mean, that something like that, we had to write some narrative piece in high school, and it was 8 years after my mom died, and that was whatever it was that we had to write.
Wow.
I couldn't go to school the next day. Like I had a legit breakdown. So I can relate to like something that's
Yeah.
seemingly so simple changing and affecting you.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And like that not being I like, gosh, now I put on my educator hat and I'm like, I hope I'm not doing that to anyone intentionally because, yeah, I mean, I guess you can never really know what is going to be that thing for someone.
Well, to the point of your first grade teacher, you don't know that one little thing. And it doesn't, like a couple stories that people have shared here, like their pivotal moment was literally picking up a piece of mail. Like you don't know what that one thing that's going to like trigger everything else. So I wouldn't worry about your assignments.
Yeah, because that's like a whole different rabbit hole to go down for sure. Yeah, so then after that I moved down to Florida, and that was like another moment I was like I did not know it at the time, but looking back, probably like a somewhat mentally abusive relationship. And I also was basically severing ties with my dad at the time. So I like moved to a new state, a new part of the country, really, was in this fairly toxic relationship. And all of this stuff was happening with my dad that was basically bringing us to the point at which we stopped speaking, and to this day haven't spoken again. And so that was in like 2005 or something. So, some big things were happening in life. And, I mean, I really but I had a good job, and so I was working at a college in Central Florida, a small college, and I had amazing coworkers that, became friends and mentors and people who believed in me and like just kept me on my feet during a time in my life that like, had I not had that, things would have probably fallen off the tracks pretty easily.
Was it creating more cracks, or were you kind of gluing them as they were happening?
I think I was gluing during that time. I think there was a lot of like recovery, healing, like building back up and building into like a new form of my own identity that felt, it probably looked from the outside like maybe a little rebellious, but I think it was me being like, I'm like not about that veneer anymore. Like I just want to be who I am and like take it or leave it. And like that very like young to mid 20s sort of like, I think vibe of, I was like, I have done that and I was good at it, but
Yeah.
like I want to be vulnerable in relationships and I want to be authentic with the people that I'm talking with. And it wasn't that I was purposefully not being that way before.
You were protecting yourself.
I was protecting myself, and I don't even think it was a conscious thing, really. And so it's interesting because I feel like so many of my close friendships are from like that time on,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it's the fault of anyone I was friends with before that. I think it was honestly like I would have never let anyone in enough to be the type of friend that I have with my friendships that are from that point on in my life. Because everything fell apart. Like everything falls apart, and you're like,
Oh, yeah.
like this is where I'm at. But like, I had a place to land. It just wasn't like it wasn't my family, and it wasn't, I had to like build my place to land as I was falling.
Your chosen family. Do you think there was a moment that caused you, or like that almost allowed you to be more authentic? Was it splitting, like kind of splitting from your father and feeling like that weight was gone? Or was there anything that you feel that made you feel like, okay, now I can do it, that you didn't do it before?
That's a good question. I don't know. I like, was it that split? Was it the like coming out of, so part of how what everything I was going through my master's program manifested was I developed an eating disorder. So I was like kind of coming out of that. So I had like started some therapy around that time too. So I think I was just developing the tools to like
Yeah.
become a little bit more self-aware. Like this toxic relationship ended, which was really good. Like, and so I think there was a lot of, but that also necessitated because it was like, okay, well, I only make this amount of money. And like, that means I only have this amount of money for rent. So like, I have to, like, I didn't have like a nest egg to fall back on. It was like, I either need to get paid enough to do this or like, I don't know, I'm going to not have a house or an apartment or whatever. And so I think it was just like the necessity. It was the first time I wasn't in like a curated environment. It's like, in college, you're
Protected a little.
yeah, you are. I mean, like it's scary in a lot of ways, but you like I lived in my sorority house and like, like I didn't have to pay electric bills and things like that. And like when I was in my master's, I was like a little bit more independent, but I had a roommate that was someone in my program. We lived in our apartment for like the 2 years we went through our master's program, and like, I mean, our rent was so cheap. I think it was like $500 or $600 a month, and we split it. So like, it was like I hadn't really had to live like super adult. Like I'm on my own. I don't have like a financial aid office to go to anymore to like, beg for help, etc. It was like this is like a sink or swim sort of moment here. And so yeah, I don't know if there was like a specific moment, but I think it was just the convergence of all of these like all these little cracks kind of like meeting up into a moment that things pivoted or shifted. And it's interesting because like a year later, I met my now husband, but like he was like, I mean, he could be a whole different episode, but like, he was going through so many, I mean, he like had lost a child and he had another child and like was going through a divorce and a separation. And like, we were like these two like little like misfits, I think, that found each other and like,
At the right time.
At the right time, but like we did not admit that to ourselves or to each other, I don't think, for like quite a while. And so I think that all of those little cracks converging in that crack, becoming at least a truer version of my authentic self, like allowed that timing to be right when it happened too.
Yeah, I mean, I met you around that time, and I always felt,
yeah, it probably was right around then.
It was probably maybe a little after you.
I met Jonathan in like 2006, I think.
I just always saw you as someone that was living their authentic life. Like they were purpose driven, or you were purpose driven, not they. You were doing your thing. You were, and I always looked at you like, because I wasn't there yet, you know, like in work life, I felt like I was pretending. In my personal life, I felt like I was pretending. There was a lot going on, and I would just look at you. And it's interesting to hear this story of like how you grew up, and you had that mask on, and you were kind of living this dual life, like your home life, but also like your performative life that people see you as. But when I met you, that's what drew me to you. I think, I don't think it was on purpose. I just think I saw you and I was like, man, she's living that. I don't know if you were at the time, but that's
like
how
you can be weird and you can also be awesome. Yeah.
And it wasn't even that. You were always so seemingly confident in whatever decisions you were making, whether that's true or not, don't know. But it always felt like there was a reason why you were making those decisions, and it was heartfelt, and it was on purpose. Whereas at the time, I was very much this timid decision maker. Like, is this going to please the most amount of people? Am I supposed to do this? Like, will this get me my next promotion? Like, you know, what society told me that I should have been living. So it's interesting to see that. I mean, by then, do you think you were living more authentically? 2008, 2009?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that like the time period I'm describing was like probably like 2005 or so. And so I think by then, you know, and I am the kind of person where, yeah, I mean, I really like, that is like one of the highest compliments you could give me, just because I think that I try to live my life with a lot of integrity. Like, integrity is really important to me. And it's, you know, just to be able to make decisions and communicate in ways that I feel are really values aligned is like a very like important thing to me. And so I think I always thought I was probably doing that, but I think I got better at knowing like what those values actually were. And, you know, and I don't ever try to approach those conversations, although I think it can come off this way to certain people sometimes, but like in a defensive or aggressive way. It's more just like, no, like this is, you know, I mean, I think walking in your truth can be really threatening to some people. And I think that has, I mean, I think back to like our time working together. And I do think that, you know, looking back, like I think I had gotten there. I mean, I think I've definitely grown and changed since my time there in a lot of different ways. But I think that kind of like unapologetic, like, you know, I have thought this through, and I trust myself to make this decision.
I think that's scary for people on the outside.
I think it's scary for a lot of people, So
because they're so confused as to how someone could be so confident in what's driving their decisions. And I commend you for it. That's what I saw, and that's why I think I like latched onto you as kind of my mentor, if you will, because I wanted to be that. And it took another 8 years for me to really like, it took a pivotal moment in my life to watch my grandmother pass away to realize I'm going to live the life that I want, not what society wants, not what I think my dad wants, not, you know, like, and you were there, and it was, I think that's the mystique of it was so much like that for me.
Yeah. So you go through some stuff, right? So I mean, I feel like, and then, I mean, I feel like this background, this intro is getting very long, but
no, I mean, I think this is your story. I don't even, I mean, I think we're getting to these moments. And so,
because it's like, how do you describe something that was like pivotal in the last few years without like, I don't know. So I guess setting the scene of like all the little things that led to like that being.
Well, and for you in particular,
that impacting you the way that that it did.
Exactly. Yeah. But so, you know, you left Florida to get your PhD and to really start or continue. Well, I would say really start living that life that you wanted to create for yourself. True?
Yeah. I mean, that was part of it. And I think the other part was like, I was I was feeling very values conflicted in the environment that I was working in. And so I think for me, it was part of walking in my truth was like, not only like this is like a good excuse for doing this thing, but I actually think I need to do this thing anyway, right? And so, so that brought me up to the Northeast, which was a wild ride, and, lived in New Hampshire for a couple of years. And I found a job out of college in the town that I was working on my PhD in that was like really very well aligned with the things that I had been doing in my career at that point. And so I was able to keep working on my PhD and all of that. And, like my doctoral work, it's founded in social justice and social change. I mean, really, I'm an environmental sociologist and I do work around like farm workers, and you experience some of my like initial things that got me interested in that. But, it was this moment where I was like, wait a minute, I just moved away from the place I could have probably done my research. So what do I do now? And it was like becoming a novice in a new field in a lot of ways, right? Like I felt like in the higher ed space, not like I was like, very well established, but I was like, I feel like I know how to navigate this environment.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, this is like a whole new cast of characters, a whole new group of players. And so that was really interesting, and got married while I was living in New Hampshire. And Jonathan was never able to get a job in the town that we lived in New Hampshire. And so he actually, as you know, was like commuting to Waltham. Yeah, he was commuting like 2 hours each way a day. He would leave at like 3:30 in the morning to go to work. And, it was just hard. And so right around the time I defended my dissertation proposal, he found a listing for the job that I have now in Boston. And, we moved here, and then something happened that did actually, I think, change my life like very significantly, but not in like an internal orientation way, but we were able to buy a house. And this was like scraping together money. The housing market was totally different then. Boston, I mean, basically within like the 6 years that we lived in that house, we sold it for like twice what we bought it for. And that changed my life. Like as a person who did not grow up with money, like having equity,
right?
So that is like a nuts and bolts life shift that I never would have planned for. I never would have expected. I never, and so sometimes I think those shifts are like, rather than being internal, they're like these external pieces. But moving to Boston in a lot of ways for us, even though it was kind of not totally on a whim, but kind of on a whim, has set both of our lives, I think, on paths that we wouldn't have predicted, including the reason we sold that house, which is that I very unexpectedly got pregnant a few years ago. So I have a stepson. He's 21 now. He's lovely. He's in school where I work and studying nursing.
That's awesome.
He was like a child when you knew him. Yep. So he's like
an adult
working full time as a nurse now. Yeah. In one of like the world's best hospitals. Yeah. Here in Boston. So that's a thing.
That's awesome.
But so as I alluded to, my husband had another child that passed away when he was really young. And so as my stepson got older, we were kind of like, I mean, long story short, the reason it was a surprise, people always laugh. They're like, you don't know how people get pregnant? I'm like, no, I understand how people get pregnant. It was basically that I was really open to it for a number of years, meaning I like was not on birth control, so on and so forth. Like we weren't trying, but we weren't not trying. And I just like never got pregnant. It was pretty clear that my husband could get people pregnant because he had before. And so we were just kind of like, it's probably something with me. And like, I didn't feel so compelled to have my own biological child. I respect people who do, but I didn't feel so compelled to do that I was like, I want to look into it, right. Basically.
You were like, if it happens, it will.
Yeah, if it happens, it will. And then as my stepson got older, we were basically like, now if it happened, we kind of like really don't want it to happen. And so long story short, you have to have an appointment to get a vasectomy. You have to have like a session, like a talk it through sort of session before you get one. So my husband had that appointment in like the summer of 2018, scheduled his his appointment for like October of that year. So like 2 months after his like consultation sort of thing. And I find out I'm pregnant like September 1st or something of that year. Like, what? So I was 37. I'm like, huh? Like, literally, my stepson was a senior in high school. Like, we were just like, and we didn't think I could get pregnant. So we were like,
right.
We were calling it literally a just in case vasectomy. Well, turns out just in case. So apparently the universe wanted me to have this kid. And it saw its door of opportunity closing. Like, it was waiting for me to be ready, and I like just wasn't ever going to be ready. And so I feel like I was in shock, honestly, like most of my pregnancy. Like, a lot of people talk about being pregnant as like a joyful thing. It brought out a lot of my, like, I think mental health issues. Like, I had really high anxiety. I had, I just think like the hormones plus the like unexpected nature of it, plus like
plus your upbringing.
We were trying to sell our house. We were trying to, just like everything. It just felt, and then I found out I was like pregnant with a boy, and I was like, just like this world, like white men in this world, just like with my own like political orientations. And, so anyway, it's just like all of these like compounding things. And so that was like not a joyful experience for me. I mean, I really like to a point of seriousness where I was like, I'm really glad that I know that like Jonathan can be a parent, because like, I don't know if I like want to do this or like even want to make it sort of thing. So, which I know sounds maybe really selfish, because I know a lot of people like struggle with things, and and again, my heart goes like for people to have what they want, but like that was my experience. And I mean, my pregnancy physically was pretty uneventful, other than right at the end I developed preeclampsia. He was breech. I had to have a C-section. Anyway, so I had my son, and right around that time, and I was having all these like kind of untreated like mental health issues, partum, postpartum, so on and so forth. And my mom at the time, she was like pretty sick. She'd gone on oxygen at some point, like during my pregnancy. We'd gone to visit her. She just really couldn't get around, right? And she'd be like, oh, I'm going to come and like help with the baby. And I'm like, you just moved into a house that's like, it's a townhouse that's 3 stories. And like, you can't walk like 10 feet. Like, I don't think you can actually help. I'm like, I don't want to be a mean person, but I also am just like, I can't. I think I feel like you have a vision of how that's going to go, and like, it's not going to be that way. And, it was really stressful, because like, I don't want to let people down. And like, I had tried to get to a good place in my relationship with her. And then, she just like, I mean, I understand now she was going through a lot, but like, I was like postpartum, like hot mess, like that couldn't really contextualize, like, why is my mom like sending me these like rage texts about like how I'm an awful person, and how I like, it was just very disorienting. And I think trying to have to like sort through that while I was like trying to care for this like little baby that did nothing at the time other than like cry and need to eat and like figure that stuff out. So that was rough. And we went to see my mom when my kiddo was like 4 months old, because she had like wanted to meet him. And I was like, as soon as I feel like comfortable traveling, like, I'm not trying to keep you from your grandson. Like, I want you obviously to meet him. It's just,
I got to recover a little.
I got stuff going on. Yeah. And so we went to see her when he was about 4 months old. So she did meet him that time. And then, a new school year started. I was like back from maternity leave. And then and a lot of stuff was going on with her. It was like, and trying to manage like an elder situation from afar is really difficult. Like, this is like, I know you were going through stuff with your grandma, and, I don't know what her care looked like, but it was like, my mom, my like random people I barely even knew when I was a kid would like call me and be like, I saw your mom yesterday, and like, she said she like slept on her kitchen floor because she fell down and like couldn't get up, and like nobody was there to help her. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, well, I'm in Boston, and like, I can't, and like, I can't be the one to like caretake for her. But like, I was very much like, I'm willing to help you in any way that I can with boundaries. Like I was like, I'm not going to like move back. Like that's not the type of relationship that we had, so on and so forth. And so that was what was causing a lot of like the, like I would be like calling like the police department in my hometown and being like, can you go do a welfare check on my mom? Cause she's like not answering her phone. And like, so anyway, long story short, she passed away February 22nd of 2020. So my kiddo was like 10 months old or so. And it was totally unexpected. And it's like, I swear I'm not making this up. It feels like a Lifetime movie sort of thing. But my grandmother, her mom, had been really sick. She was like 85, had been really sick. I was not close with her at all, but had been really sick with cancer. And my mom was doing like the obligatory like daughter thing and like going to take care of her when she could, but she was dealing with all of her own health stuff.
Yeah.
And basically my mom had written me, I think it was like a Thursday night, and she was like, I'm like driving to Crawfordsville, which was like the town my grandmother was like in care at. And she's like, and I think this is like the end for your grandmother. And again, I didn't really have a relationship with my grandmother. So I think I said like, I'll be thinking of you as you go through this. And like, I'm really sorry that this is happening. And like, I hope that, you feel as at peace as possible as, whatever. And she texted me back like, thanks, baby, or something like that. And I got a call on Saturday afternoon from my mom's like best friend, who's kind of like an aunt of mine. And I've lived in the Northeast so long, I now call people aunts and not aunts. That's so crazy. Anyway, she's kind of like an aunt of mine. And so I get a call from her, and I'm just thinking like, okay, my mom probably asked her to call me to tell me that like my grandmother passed away and whatever. And she called, and I'm like, oh, hi, like, are you like calling to tell me about this? Like mom had texted me like when she was on her way there. And she's like, yeah, your grandmother did pass away. She's like, but that's not what I'm calling about. I'm calling because like your mom died. And I'm like, what? Like, it was just like what? And so you're just trying to I was just totally like I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, wait, did my grandma die or did my mom die? She was like, they both died. And so basically, long story short, my mom had been found like in her house. So she had come back. She had been by her mom's side when she passed away at like 2 a.m. on this Saturday, had like driven back to her house, which was like an hour-long drive probably. And like at some point a few hours later, like somebody found her in her bedroom. And so did they have COVID? Probably. Like I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, this is like one of those things. It was like 3 weeks before the world went into lockdown, right? And we know now like this was spreading, and it was particularly spreading in these facilities, right? And so, I mean, maybe it's just a really weird coincidence, but it also feels like, two people with really poor health dying within like hours of each other.
And you just find out that these two people died, and do you feel that kind of, I don't know, did you feel that because of the last couple months of you talking with your mom and her wanting to come out and you saying no, and then her being sick and all these things, was that weighing on you too, to add to the postpartum and everything else that you were still battling?
Oh yeah, it was all just like it was just a mess. And honestly, like, to this day, I feel really conflicted, and I don't know if other people can resonate with this or you can resonate with this. It's like, of course I feel like grief that she passed. Like that is obviously like, I know that I had good moments with my mother, right? And now that I am, a mom to my own kiddo, and I have my stepson and everything, like I know that these relationships are really complex, but also I felt like relieved in some ways. And maybe that sounds terrible to say, but it's like, she wasn't living. I mean, I don't get to judge if somebody's life is good or not, but like, I don't think she was living in a way that like felt like a joyful way to live. Right. And so part of me, and it was like, we were getting to the point where we were like, we're going to need to try to sell her house and get her into assisted living. I'm like, you can't be sleeping on like your kitchen floor. Like, this is not a thing, so I feel like, so part of the guilt is like, maybe some of the relief is like, what were we going to do? But I really do think a lot of it is, just like, she yeah, it was like a really rough life. I mean, looking back now, I'm like, she had a really rough life, in a lot of different ways. And I
Yeah.
think I can see her in a different way than I saw her in our own kind of like mother-daughter relationship. But yeah, so she passed away. We went to Terre Haute, like cleaned out her, like I was the executor. I mean, really all she had was her house, but like, there's like a lot after people pass away. And we got back from being in my hometown. We got back to Boston, I think on like March 1st or March 2nd of 2020. And then, yeah, like a week or two later, like the world went into lockdown. I had a 10-month-old. My mom had just died. We'd had this really complicated relationship, and daycare shut down. Like, everybody was in that place of like, do I need to wipe my groceries off? Like, am I going to is this thing like Ebola? Like, what is this? And that was scary. And yeah, I just like, I don't know. And so probably in like November or so of 2020, so like 6 or 7 months later, my little one had like gone back to daycare, so on and so forth. And I just had this moment where I was like, Matt, I don't know if you've had these moments in your life, but I was just like, so like, I mean, obviously like I put on weight when I was pregnant. I like, but I think I did the thing that I don't think it was unique to me. Maybe it was, but like I was like drinking a lot at the beginning of the pandemic. Like I was like not eating the healthiest. I like just was like, I think we were all just like trying to cope and like I was just doing the things that make me feel comfort. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to be like November or so of that year. And I was like, I cannot like live my life like this is not a good direction for me. Like I really think I had like gotten to a place where I had like strayed far from the things that like, I don't know, feel like that authentic me. And so, yeah, I had this moment that year where I was like, if I don't change something, nothing will change. Like I just remember saying that to myself. Like I can feel all these ways about something, but if I don't change something pretty dramatic about like the way that I'm like I was still very functional professionally, but like I was like, I don't think I'm being the kind of like I kind of came into motherhood believing like you got to put your own mask on before you put your kids on, right? In the airplane. And I'm like, I'm not putting my mask on. Like this isn't, I don't want to go down this path. And so, I think that since that point, which was, a pretty pivotal point for me, like really trying to.
Do you think there was something that triggered it?
I don't know. I think it was a whole bunch of things. I think it was just like, look, like you get to that point where you like look in the mirror and you don't even recognize yourself, not just physically. I mean, physically was part of it, but like, just like, I'm like, what has happened here? Like we really need, and
I don't think you were alone.
Yeah, I think I had that moment.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I think, did that during the pandemic, and at some point, hopefully, we all were able to have that moment. But I'm sure that some of yours was extended with the fact that family members had died right before, and you had to deal with all that, and you have a fairly new child at home. That's a whole new experience. Plus, you can't go anywhere, right? You couldn't do anything. So I'm sure there was grief as part of that, whether it was acknowledged or not. That was kind of playing a role in that.
Absolutely. So many things.
What did you change first?
I think I really decided to first tackle like the ennui that had become like day-to-day things. So like feeding myself and my family. Like, how can I make this like a more enjoyable thing and not just a chore, right? Like just like day-to-day things. Like what has become something that I like resent doing or having to do, and how do I like bring joy back into that? And so for me, like meals became a way to do that, right? And so like getting more into cooking. And what I realized about cooking was like, I really hate grocery shopping. And so I'm like, what is something I can do to make grocery shopping easier? And so like finding an app where I could like recipe plan and it puts together my grocery list for me. And like, I think it was just like beginning to like, I think sometimes we just try to do everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everything needs to change. And it's like, no, like what is something I have to do all the time and how can I make that better?
Right. Less of a
And
chore.
like we have to, yeah, like we,
You have to
you
eat.
know, especially when you have a kiddo, like you have to eat and you have to like feed your family, right? And so how can you make that something that feels like not like monotonous and boring and just like an obligation, and how do you actually like make that something fun? And so I feel like that's where I started, and then like that kind of mindset or approach like began to like percolate into other parts of
Yeah.
life too. You know, I was still like running and exercising and things like that because that's been like a part of my routine, I guess, as an adult, but I was like not just going through the motions anymore. Like I
It's
was like,
purposeful.
cool, I'm going to like try this new thing, or I'm going to like work towards something, or yeah, it felt more purposeful again. And so I think it's, again, it was just like examining like what am I doing? I mean, the other thing that helped was like I stopped drinking so much. And I do think that helped me. You know, I was like, I still want to be able to enjoy a beverage and whatever, but I was like, you know, like once or twice a week drink it is probably okay. Like I probably don't need to be drinking like every night, like a full bottle of wine every night. And, you know, so I think it was just like setting some of those boundaries and then like seeing those adjustments work out, and just it made me feel more present like with my kid. It made me feel more present with, you know, just myself and my family and my friends when I was able to start seeing them again and, you know, and all of that. And so I think that has been you know, and I've like since then started like a gratitude journal and just like really trying to like focus in on, again, we have one life to live. You have to do a lot of stuff as part of this life, at least in the society we live in now. So how do we make that purposeful if we can?
Right. Yeah. So looking back at the whole of the pandemic and the lockdown and all these pieces, is there any part of you that's grateful that you had that time or you were forced into that time? Or would you have rather just like, you know, going through that, having the child, he's 10 months, your mom dying, your grandmother dying, taking care of that, and then jumping right back into that everyday grind?
No, I think I'm very thankful for it. And I think the other thing that it did for me is like my job is very, I think I always viewed my job as something like I needed to be like very present and on for all the time, and like in a physical way too. You know, like being physically present at things, and not being able to do that for a while right after, well, not right after, but a few months after. I mean, I think maternity leave was actually really good for that. Like I was gone for 3 months and like things didn't fall apart, and like turns out I was still relevant when I got back. Like that wasn't that big of a deal, right? Like, and I think that was a really good lesson. And then to have that, and then like 10 months later go into this like pandemic and basically have the thing that I thought made my job so essential taken out of the equation. I actually think that was really good professionally too, because I think that it helped me flex different mental muscles, both with myself. It helped my team do that. I think thinking about community work in like more expansive ways, and how do we build community in spaces that don't just have to be physical. And it just brought, at least the effect it had at my university, the university I work at now, is like, you know, like I think a lot of us were meeting people that we had never really met before, you know, because it was like there were all these like kind of task forces on different things. And again, it's like, you know, I don't prefer to meet people when we're trying to address an emergency, but like it's a way to meet them. And because everything was happening virtually, that was, you know, so I think both for like the personal stuff, I think the pandemic created a container within which what I needed to have happen happened. But I actually think it did that professionally in a lot of ways too.
I would agree. I think a lot of people are coming out of, well, I don't know. Are we out of it? Probably not. But
I'm not totally sure. And I'm sure there's a totally different feeling there than there is here about it.
We've been out of it since week 4. So it's
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
But I think that companies, whether they like it or not, have realized that we can be productive and we can do all the things just as good, if not better, when we have the opportunity to be remote if we need to be. Doesn't mean we have to always be remote. Doesn't mean we always have to be in the office, but that we're capable of persisting through something that's as challenging as it is. So I talked to someone, my friend Morgan, who called this kind of the pandemic and the lockdown the Great Awakening, in which a lot of people, we've talked about it. I think we talked about it before we started recording, but just in the fact that this time has given a lot of people the opportunity to go, is this really what I want? Is this really what serves me? Am I living authentically? Do I care? Right. And so, I mean, you've been in the space in which you're living what you care for and what you want to do, which is awesome. And I feel like you've always kind of been on that direction, and that. A lot of us didn't know that and still don't know that, but we were
my moments though, where I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah.
But I think it's afforded people the opportunity to at least sit down and go, is what I'm doing right now serving me the way it should? Or in the way that I'm serving it? Is it reciprocal? Is there any value that's coming back to me? And so I think that a lot of people will see, when we're out of this 5 years from now, we'll look back and sure, we'll have our hankerings about the things we didn't like. But I think there is going to be some value in this time spent in this weird space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's like, I think about like there was like 10 months or something when lockdown started, and then daycares were closed here for 4 months before they even like reopened. So he was home for 4 months, but that was hard. It was really hard, but also like I got to see things that I wouldn't have gotten to see, and like got to experience things, and but when his daycare opened back up, I happily took him there like the minute it opened.
He needs to socialize.
Absolutely. That's what it was all about. But I think there are those things too. It's like forced togetherness in some ways, but it helps you. Like, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, like Jonathan and like my stepson and Cayman and I would be like, we'd like play like Mario Kart for hours.
Right.
Because like,
and when would you allow yourself to do it? Right. There was no other moment. Yeah, I lost my mind for like the first 2 months, and then I somehow found a way to snap out of it, which is good. That's impressive for me. But in any case, I appreciate you coming on here because, a lot of these stories have really been like this one or two big moments, like something like drastically changed. And what I find so interesting about your story, and I honestly, we've known each other for 100 years now, and I didn't know these pieces. I always just thought of you as the person you are now. And to hear, I think the most impactful part of your story honestly goes back to your childhood for me, and to understand how you got to where you are now and how you had to use like a protective blanket for so long until you were ready to kind of shed that, and probably when people started acknowledging your authenticity of like who you were and what you wanted to be kind of in that 20s period, probably was like, oh, I can do this. Like, who cares? Get rid of everything. Here we go.
Yeah.
So I think, you've had all these, like you said, that vase cracking, and eventually like, do you feel like it cracked all the way, or do you think you're kind of, it stayed mostly in shape, if we're thinking metaphors here?
Yeah, maybe it cracked wide open in like a good way. Now I can create like a mosaic table out of it or something, Like I think all of the beauty is still there. I just think it's, and it's ever evolving. It might be a mosaic table for a while and then need to be repurposed at some other point, right? Because it's like that's how it's going to happen. But I do think that you get to a point, and I think that, not to get too like, woo woo about it, but it's like I have this like little creature that I like did not expect to have in my life. I told that story, and it's like, I feel like every day I'm like, there are ways. Even like professionally, I have some things unfolding that like I never would have predicted or even planned for in a million years. But it's like,
Yeah. You're living in it.
Being open and being ready and, and also saying like, I don't just have to do that because it's there, right? Like I really want to make sure it's the right thing, at least for now. It might not be the right thing forever. And so I feel like that's where the vase is at. It's like, yeah, maybe it's like broken into shards and like, that's okay. That's where it's at right now, but it doesn't mean it can't still be something, right?
No, I agree. And I think a good way to end this, in my opinion, is that you are now allowing yourself to be really good at something instead of being just good at a bunch of other things. Like you're truly like,
I hope so.
This is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to be awesome at.
I really hope so.
I'm always in awe of you, my friend, and I appreciate you sharing your story. And
back at you. Thanks for having me, and it's so good to see you.
I know. Well, next time that we are up there, we will make a point to be near Boston so that we can get together.
Yes, please. And, it's a wonderful place to visit, especially if you come from that hot Florida summer up to this like beautiful New England summer. So,
which is just as hot, by the way, until the nighttime.
I would beg to differ.
I don't know. My dad doesn't.
At least
have
it does
air.
Cool down at night. It does cool down at night. We do have central air, so I don't have to experience that. But sounds perfect. There's plenty of room.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you sometime soon.
Yeah, I would love that.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.